The shifting balance of global religious populations is inevitable, but I think trying to change it is futile.
Religions are changing.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I would also like to welcome you to this edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. We're very glad you've joined us for today's discussion. And by the way, there are past discussions available via our archive on the internet website. We'll talk about that a little bit more a little while later. But for now, I'd like for you to meet our panelists so we can begin our discussion. We'll start with the gentleman to my right.
I'm John Robert Skeldon, a Catholic priest of the Diocese of Fort Worth.
I'm Rabbi Jordan Ofsire. I'm retired, living in Palm Springs, California, yet active in my community, teaching classes and leading services.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as senior minister of the First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm professor of church history and ecumenics at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, and I'm an Assemblies of God minister.
I'm Othel H. Lakey, a bishop in retirement of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, living in Buford, Georgia.
My name is John Peterson. I'm an Episcopal priest in the Diocese of Washington.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today, and I also would like to welcome you to the program again. Looking forward to this discussion. Let's get right to it, shall we? The religious profile of the world is rapidly changing, driven primarily by differences in fertility rates and the size of youth populations among the world's major religions, as well as by people switching faiths. Over the next 4 decades, the prediction is that Christians will remain the largest religious group, but Islam will grow faster than any other major religion. If current trends continue, by 2050, the number of Muslims will nearly equal the number of Christians around the world. Atheists, agnostics, and other people who do not affiliate with any religion, though increasing in countries such as the United States and France, will make up a declining share of the world's total population. Here in the United States, Christians will decline from more than 3/4 of the population in 2010 to 2/3 in 2050. And Judaism will no longer be the largest non-Christian religion. Muslims will be more numerous in the U.S. than people who identify as Jewish on the basis of religion. Projections by the Pew Research Center suggest that Christians are expected to decline from 78% of the U.S. population in 2010 to 66% in 2050. Some social theorists have suggested that as countries develop economically, more of their inhabitants will move away from religious affiliation. The projections in the Pew Report are not based on theories about economic development leading to secularization. The correlation, however, is hard to ignore. Today, I would like our panelists to consider these 3 questions. Are these trends unalterable and inevitable, or are there some faith-based groups in America? What can they do now, especially among Christians and Jews, to stave off the decline of their respective religions? And then secondly, how does this research affect evangelization and the outreach plans of mainstream religion in America and around the world? And then finally, do you agree with the sociologists that suggests that as countries develop economically, more of their inhabitants will move away from religious affiliation? That's our discussion for today. Let's go back to those who helped to begin our program. For that, we're going to return to Dr. Robeck. Dr. Robeck, glad to have you on the program again. And if you could tell us more of your thoughts on your opening statement.
Yeah, excuse me. I think the idea of staving off decline in our religion is kind of a wrong-headed idea. I don't think that we are in the business of staving it off. I think we're in the business of trying to be faithful to God, and where it comes out, it comes out. But I do think that I get tired of polls. I really get tired of polls. You know, we have the Gallup poll, we have the Barna poll, we have the Pew Research Center polls, and so forth. They're all working on religion. They're all trying to make projections about where things are now and where things will be in 50 years or 60 years or 100 years or whatever. In most cases, we find that pollsters don't really work very well when you think about the long-term predictability of the future. I mean, all you have to do is think about all the futures that have come and gone over the past 50 years, and you realize that about 95% of it has been a waste of time. And I have to look at this and say, in a sense, it's in God's hands. I'm not going to worry too much about that. Now, that being said, I also recognize that there are some realities that we probably need to face. One thing is Islam is growing, and in part it's growing because they are reproducing faster than, say, Christians are. There are reasons for that, birth control being one of them, multiple spouses being another one, the youth of the movement being another one. Those are all realities that I think are important to recognize. But, you know, if you go by the pollsters, you know, the pollsters after the 1950s were saying Christianity is dead in Africa. There is no future for Christianity in Africa because there's no support from the governments that used to support the churches that were present in those states. And in fact, Christianity has exploded in Africa and bypassed Islam by a significant amount in that region of the world. No pollster would have ever seen that or accepted that in the 1950s. So I think this is something that, in a sense, is trying to, in a sense, taps into the fears of some people, but it need not do so. One last thing, and that is, I would say, there is, I think, a correlation between North and South, rich and poor, and whether or not people in the North or in the South find a need for God. Okay, and I think that if you look even at, I was looking at in my course on church history this week, I was noticing that church attendance in Scandinavian countries, in Germany, northern part, is like at 3 and 4%. You go down to the southern part, and it's like in the 40s and 50%. So there is this kind of realization that as you move southward, the recognition of the role that religion plays is more significant. It's also the case that as people gain wealth and they feel like they have more control over their lives, they find less need, perceived need, for God in their lives. And I think poor people recognize that without God, they don't have very much at all.
All right, thank you very much. And then Ken and Peterson, welcome back to the program. And your expanded thoughts on your opening statement, please.
Well, my expanded thoughts are going to just be expanded thoughts on what Mel has said, because I'm basically in total agreement with him in the analysis that he has given. I am not going to talk about polls, and I'm not going to talk about statistics, and even Pew, which I highly respect, but the phenomena that I see that's actually happening within the church today, and I would be eager to hear what Jordan has to say about this in the context of Judaism as well, if he sees a similar movement within Judaism. I was Secretary General of the Anglican Community between 1995 and 2004. And during that time, a very historic Lambeth Conference took place. A Lambeth Conference is where bishops from around the entire Anglican Communion come together for 2 weeks of deliberation, prayer, discussion, and resolutions. This conference, as I said, takes place once every 10 years. During that Lambeth Conference, there was a radical change that had taken place from the previous Lambeth Conference in 1998. If you look at the photograph of the 1998 Lambeth Conference, the hue in that photograph is radically different than the hue that you have in the 1998. In 1988, you had a hue of basically white bishops, colonial bishops who were serving in Africa. 10 years later, you had a hue that represented exactly the indigenous bishops that were now in line. And so the colonial bishops were gone in 1998, and a radical change really took place at that time. And the radical change took place basically in what we call the Northern Church and the Southern Church. The Southern churches, Asia, Africa, South America, had a very and does have a very different perspective than the Northern Church does. That being Canada, the United States, Europe, and then to throw in Australia and New Zealand. And here we see a difference, particularly in relationship to sexuality issues, economic issues, the North being much more liberal than what you have in the Global South. And therefore, in the Global South, you have a radically different type of Christianity than you have in the North. And what I would like to say, and to open it up to discussion, the profile is different. And I think that we are now seeing two very different Christianities unfolding and coming into being.
All right, thank you. Let's now hear from some of the other panelists. And across the table, Father Skeldon, welcome back to the program today. And your perspective on this subject, please.
Thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here. This, of course, this notion of the global North and the global South is also a big part of discussion in Catholic circles, big time. You know, and that there's actually linkage. One could sort of see between sort of the preoccupation that Catholics, like in Europe and North America, may have vis-a-vis Catholics in Latin America or Africa in particular, or Asia. A Catholic writer who's written a lot about this is the journalist John Allen. I don't know if
Yes.
people here, but he really sort of tries to tease out, you know, sometimes, you know, the American Catholic Church is about less than 5% of the population of global Catholicism, yet, you know, we think everything, you know, orbits around us. And so, which is not true, obviously. But I think Pope Francis in particular has really started to, you know, hit some of these points. There's a phrase that I was really taken by when he came into office a little over 3 years ago, and he's used several times. And I really had to wrap my head around it because it's a very provocative phrase, and particularly Catholics in the United States may not always like to hear it. But he wants a poor church for the poor. And of course, that then makes one think, or what does that mean? I guess it's going to the Beatitude, you know, blessed are the poor in spirit, or blessed are the poor. A church, because what does the use of the word poor here mean? It means you know you're in need. You know you are in want, that you lack, that you are not the center of existence. That it does go into discussions we've had on like gratitude and gratefulness and thanksgiving that we've had before. You know that you're in need, and then your orientation is always toward those who are in need. So a poor church for the poor. But it's really a provocative statement that demands a lot of reflection. But I think it then helps us to see that, you know, where the church is exploding in like quantitative growth is like in Africa and Latin America, of course, and of course throughout Asia as well. And I think it sort of helps us in the global North, right, Europe and in the United States, Canada, to sort of see, you know, we are a part of a much bigger, you know, again, that notion of what the word Catholic means, that James Joyce, you know, amusingly said, here comes everybody. Yeah, everybody is coming.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's come now across the table. Rabbi Ofsire, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Your perspective, we've talked a little bit about Judaism and the projected decline thereof. Is that a concern, or is that something that you're just going to let ride as it come as it comes?
Well, it's a concern, and it's an oversimplification. The reality as it exists in the world today is that there are two major centers of Judaism. Those are Israel and the United States, several hundreds of thousands of Jews in other parts of the world, and I won't go into the details about that. The demographic reality is that Israel's numbers are increasing and the United States numbers are declining. I just happened to have done a presentation on this several weeks ago, and haven't the time to go into it. But the situation in the United States is really a kind of mixed metaphor with regard to Jewish numbers. There are significant groups of Jewish people who are very, very grounded in the tradition, who are very, very fervent, who are very learned, and there are others who are not. And the task before us is to solidify and to undergird in whatever way we can those numbers and those commitments going forward.
All right, thank you very much. Now let's come back across the table. Let's hear from Reverend Plumley, and then we'll go to Bishop Lakey in a moment. Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I think the thing that's been said, a lot of good conversation so far, but what has really stuck with me is Dr. Robeck's statement that this is not really our calling, to be concerned about all these things. And I think at the level of a local congregation, yeah, we worry about numerical decline, and we do our best to turn things around. We do what we can do, and we try to remain faithful to all of the Great Commission and the commandments and the things that we're asked to do. And the Spirit of God works through that, and we have faith that Spirit will continue. But you know, I don't see Jesus anywhere in the Bible too concerned about whether his crowds were gaining or diminishing in their size, or even who was there. Those who came, and he preached. You know, I see us called to make disciples, to teach the ways of Jesus, to learn to coexist in the world, which means to be reconciled to each other, to love one another. We're called to do that. We're called to love our enemies. We're called to do good to those who persecute us. And I think those are the things about which we will be faithful, and by which we will show, by doing those things, we will show the world, we will show whoever who is our Lord, and how we should behave. By those things, we are witnesses. And you know, when push comes to shove for the local religious community, that's what we're about. And the other is interesting, maybe, but not of a lot of meaning for us.
All right, thank you. Next to you is Bishop Lakey, and your perspective, please.
Thank you very much. This has been a very enlightening discussion. I've really appreciated what Mel Robeck had to say in his description of things, and Father Skeldon in terms of the Roman Catholic perspective of Pope Francis, and of course Rabbi Offsire and how he perceives it out of the Judaic point of view. The black religious experience coming out of here in America it's from the bottom up, so to speak, rather than from the top down. And when John Peterson talks about the photograph of the Anglican Church, you know, changing its complexion, because when you look at Methodism, for example, or you look back and say, oh, you know, it wouldn't put all white bishops. Well, the reason was because all the black bishops are over here in their own church. And see, we had our own thing, and that perspective gives, because I was a pastor and a bishop, in the sense that you're working with the people who've been the victims, so to speak, of the marginalization, of the deprivation of society, of the economic poor, of being the poor, and you're working with a church within those constraints. And so some of your categories are a bit foreign to the experiences of African American Christians, and we need to keep that in perspective. Who cares about our distinction between global North and global South when you're dealing with people who don't know where their next meal is coming from, or whose son has been shot by the police, or whose daughter has been strung out on crack cocaine, or whose grandbaby is born. Those are the life-to-death issues. What does the faith have to say? What does the church have to say in these kinds of situations? What does our religion do for people where people live and move and have their being? And until the church, and unless the church, all of us, deal with that, which I think comes out of the Old Testament emphasis, come out of the Jesus ethic, we're missing, I think, the point.
In just a few seconds we have remaining for this segment, let's come back to Dr. Robeck. With regard to proselytizing and evangelism, is there no concern there from your perspective that the message gets out?
I don't think we're called to look at statistics and say, oh my, we need to be sending more people to this region or that region, or targeting this people or that people, or putting birth control into the water of Muslims, or you know what? I mean, that's not our job. Our job is to be faithful. That's what I think. I mean, it's very simple. The words that we look forward to as Christians are, well done, good and faithful servant. That's enough.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all and that's enough for this segment, actually, because that's all the time we have left for now. Much more could be said, I'm sure. We'll save some of that for the summation. But before we go to the summaries, I'd like for you to hear this important announcement. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark. I do welcome you back, and so glad that you've joined us, everyone who's tuned in. If you're looking at this via the internet, there are other programs, too, you can check out through our archives. But I do look forward to hearing from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, or you have comments about the one you're watching today, or some even in the past, we welcome those as well. Now let's go for our summations, and for that, we return to Father Skeldon.
Thank you very much. The discussion has sort of focused on, what may happen in the future. And I like Dr. Robeck, what he was sort of emphasizing, we have to be faithful. This is something you get across, or as Catholics, I often hear from Pope Francis in various ways, to trust, to have faith in the time and the place in which we find ourselves now. Yeah. He calls it like the realism of the gospel. The Pope has sort of used that term in various ways. And I think that that's something that we have to hold fast to. What are we doing? How are we spreading? How are we being faithful to the gospel now in the time and the place in which we find ourselves?
Thank you very much for your participation today. Reverend Plumley,
Thank
your
you.
summation.
One of the things that has not been mentioned in this really fine discussion that I think we've had is the potential for forcible change, enforced change in religion. That has unfortunately been a part of world history, and Christians have been awful at spreading the gospel at the point of a sword and so forth. And scads of folks have been victims of that. And I think that there is a reason for concern about that. The spread of freedom, however, and the consequent free exercise and free choice regarding religion is a concern that we need to give some attention to and make sure is always there in every country.
All right, thank you very much. Bishop Lakey, your summation.
The shifting balance of religious populations is an interesting and in time a significant matter. But it seems to me, as one of these hymn writers says, my times are in God's hands, and my God, I wish them there. Our call is to be faithful to the moment and leave the future trends and populations in the hands of a loving and caring God.
Thank you. And now, Canon Peterson, your summation.
Yes, I want to be able to respond to Bishop Lakey's statement during the time. I think that one of the things that's happening within the church today is that there is a greater awareness of what's happening locally. We saw that, for example, in the Lambeth Conference photograph and with the black faces in Africa, that to take care of the oppressed, to take care of the poor. And I think that that is one of the significant changes that is taking place today in the church, and one that must continue.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Robeck, your summation.
You know, I think I'm not a fatalist. I think of myself as being a realist, and I also look at myself as being one who's quite willing to trust God for the future, for everything. I think Christians and other people of faith need to be aware of the realities around them, but I'm not too worried about what happens 50 years down the line. I'm not going to be here, and I'll leave that to God and to the next generation to carry out. For now, the most common or the most frequent command in the whole of Scripture is fear not. And I'm ready to stand there and try to obey that.
All right, thank you very much. And now, Rabbi Ofsire, your summation, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on a comment that Tom Plumley had made. The Jewish people find themselves under attack in many, many countries throughout the world. On the one hand, look at the newspaper and the headlines and so forth. Not the case in the United States, although anti-Semitism exists. And in Israel, there is a nation that can defend itself and act in its own interest, thank God, we say. And concluding and continuing with the United States, we have a great deal that's very positive to appreciate. And yet, I would conclude by saying Judaism has survived persecutions and pogroms, but it cannot survive Jewish ignorance. We need to make sure that our people know and appreciate, to paraphrase Christian Friends, what indeed is the Jewish thing to do.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you each one for participating today. Look forward to coming back again another time. But for now, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.